Hi there. My name is Michael Marks. I head up the product management team here at BetterCloud. But today, I just get to play moderator to four fantastic panelists. The situation today is that the explosion of the adoption of SaaS applications has resulted in this fundamental shift in how employees access their business systems and applications. The challenge is that this shift has fundamentally altered the threat landscape and how businesses secure their environment, and not adapting to that ongoing change can leave your business at risk. So with that, Colin, why don't you kick us off with a quick introduction and an explanation as to what your biggest security challenge has been for your organization in the past year or so?
Hi, thanks for having me. Thanks to everybody else for joining. My name's Colin McCarthy. I'm the VP for Global IT for Essence. We're part of Group M, part of WPP. We're an advertising agency. I'm based here in New York, but we are a global company. Our biggest challenge in the last 18 months has been a reduction and then the growth of the company. Being in the client services industry, when the client was spending less money at the height of COVID, we had a reduction in staff and we had to work through refining and improving our deprovision process. Certainly when people that were being unfortunately, deprovisioned were remote. And you had to sort of secure their device rather than them being in the office and collecting them, which was the established practice. And then when the economy and clients started to sort of bounce back and started to spend money again, we had a huge growth in the company. So we had to sort of revise the remote onboarding, and a lot of that was through revising sort of how applications were provisioned, but also the information that we gave users and the support tools that we had to use.
Yeah, I'm very sure that's a story that resonates with a lot of people in our audience. Claire, how about you?
So I'm Claire. I'm head of IT for Dr. Martens. I'm also their global service manager. So Dr. Martens is a really interesting company to work for. As you can imagine, we have had a really interesting time as a retailer during the pandemic. Our business has actually gone from strength to strength during COVID, which is a really unusual story, as you would imagine. During the pandemic, we grew by 15%, which is really unusual. And our EBITDA grew by 22%. So very, very, really radical figures, which was a really interesting proposition for us to be able to support from an IT perspective, especially when you consider that every single market that we have has had some kind of restriction from a retailing side of things. So we had lots of staff that were working from home, and not just from a retail side of things, but also from our office space. So we had to find a new way of being able to service them from a technology side of things. So we had a completely different way of operating that we had to come up with. And we had to think about how we could secure that, not only from their end user device perspective, but also from their just general technology side of things. So lots of people were working remotely. During that as well, we IPO'd, so we are now on the London Stock Exchange, which is an amazing story for us to be able to tell. But with that came lots of different compliance constraints. So again, lots of audits and lots of security things that we had to consider. So yeah, lots of security things for us to undertake and imagine, and lots of audits. So yeah, interesting time for us.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like it. Can't wait to dive into the details there.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Aaron, how about you? What's been going on with your organization over the past year?
Thanks, Michael. My name is Aaron Obo. I'm the VP of SaaSOps, Governance and Compliance at Zapari. We are a SaaS healthcare company. We build sort of white label software for the healthcare payers to manage their members and portals and providers. So we run the gamut of that portal, and also we provide predictive analytics tool to help the customer experience. I've had sort of the responsibility of infrastructure and security and now governance and compliance. And about 3 years ago, I sold the idea of SaaSOps to the company, and hence I took the title. But part of the challenge we've had is really as a direct response of COVID accelerated a lot of our teleworking and working from home policies, where prior to that, it was kind of a hybrid, like we kind of wanted to do it, but we appreciated the collaborative nature of the company and getting things done quickly. So with COVID, 100% working from home was a big challenge where we had to kind of mature and accelerate those policies and technologies that helped us manage our remote workers, getting new people onboarded. And we were hiring during COVID because we recognized we can actually do this working from home thing. So people on the technology side were catching up with trying to support people ops or human resources from onboarding people, getting machines to them, and then getting down to actually securing those laptops. So it's been very challenging and fun times for us. And BetterCloud was part of that journey, I wanted to add, because it was one of the tools we leveraged to help us achieve those goals.
Love hearing that. Absolutely. Great. And last and certainly not least, Jason.
Hi, my name is Jason Maud, and I am the Chief Technology Advocate of Starling Bank. So Starling Bank is a relatively new digital-only bank in the United Kingdom. And we were founded in 2014 and launched in 2017. So we haven't been around that long. And we are growing rapidly. We are taking more and more on deposits. We're doing really well. We are approaching being a profitable company, which is a fantastic milestone for any new business to reach. But with that comes challenges, and a lot of our security challenges aren't actually related to COVID at all. COVID didn't really affect us in a security sense. We had built the bank with the assumption that people would be running it from their laptops wherever they were, rather than specifically in an office or anything like that. So we'd already built those security protocols and precautions in. The challenge for us is that as we grow, we obviously have more data to protect. We have a wide, both more in depth, so just volume, and in width, in types of data and products that we offer and services that we offer, and so on. Coupled with that, the growth brings new threats and new actors who want to attack us, because we are now more of a profitable target for them to attack. So most of our security concerns lie with stepping up to this new level of growth that we've achieved, and making sure that we can counteract the security threats that come along with that.
Wonderful. It sounds like every organization has had different challenges over the past year, which is great, because I think anyone in the audience is going to be able to resonate with something that all of you are facing. Claire, why don't we start with you? Why don't you walk us through some of the key initiatives that you started to address the challenges that your business was facing from that security perspective, and of course the compliance perspective, as you were talking about preparing for IPO?
Yeah, of course. So one of the biggest projects that we had was we started a migration from Google to M365, and we'd started that before the pandemic had begun. And that's one of those kind of projects that you can't really down tools during a pandemic, so we just had to accelerate it. So that made for some interesting times, but it was one of those things that we put pedal to metal, and we delivered that really quickly, and it was a huge enabler for our staff. We also then had to look at what we could do to help survive our remote working, really. So what was going to be important for business survival, and what we could do to help bring security for our remote workers, what would be really useful for them. So obviously, multi-factor authentication was a huge thing. So helping to secure our endpoints, so AV, MFA, and some enhancements to our passphrases. So those are some key things that we implemented. But with that, security hadn't really been something that we'd really emphasized massively before, because it wasn't something that was as important for our staff, because they were all in the office all the time. So there was information available to them, but when you take them out of that environment, it's something that's it doesn't seem as important to them. So we had to do a lot of work on raising awareness. So there were lunch and learn sessions, more training, things like that, to kind of make the importance around security and their importance, what they needed to do to put the emphasis back on them around security. And then we've done a lot of work around monitoring for end user devices as well. So we've tried to do some pieces around that to raise awareness and to ensure security for our remote workers just generally. So big projects and huge investment from the business just generally in our cybersecurity piece.
Wonderful. Appreciate you walking us through that. Aaron, what about you? What are your key initiatives that you started this year, especially in that governance, risk, and compliance space, and how this whole teleworking has evolved your entire area of responsibility?
Yes, yeah, the very good question. So a big thing for us was, how do we switch from sort of this hybrid quasi, teleworking policy to a full 100% teleworking policy? And part of the challenge was really everything came to the network in the office before, and then when that stopped happening, we had to quickly rally around, and we had several meetings, and with the human resource side of the house saying, we understand you guys you verify the identity, and this kind of goes back to the security and making sure that everyone was compliant. And the way we did things was, all right, so you guys how do you verify that this person who we're hiring is a person that they say they are, because they're no longer in the office? So that was the first thing we had to check. They had a way to do it, background check, that worked out fine. And then they turned around to us and say, all right, how do we get the machines to people, in a timely manner, and making sure that it's secure? So that's the other initiative. The third part was engineering. Engineering was, all right, we have to protect the assets. How can we really effectively do this, remotely? I mean, there's several tools out there that you could use. And at the time, we're using Jamf to manage and provision laptop. So it was, how do we enhance the security in that? And so we played around with a couple of things, a couple of different tools, and not to mention them right now, but it slowed down a lot of the engineering efforts and people getting their laptops and working. So we had to pull back and say, all right, how can we do this effectively? So we put a lot of different things in place. And one of the things was, we larger initiative was getting to the zero trust identity, which is a project that's still ongoing, by the way, just to say we never fully got to the end of it, because of course there are roadblocks, the issues with it. But part of it was, we also found out that it's not just securing the laptop. There's that whole communicative part of how you work, whether you standardize on Zoom or Meet or whatever it is. That communication piece has to be kind of ironed out so that everyone was aware. And then how do we then get to actually simulating some of those, quick, passing through the hallway, times when you make those decisions in the office. So a lot of those things we had to kind of deal with, and they were looking to us in the SaaSOps department to try and get the tools out there and get support. BetterCloud was one of the things we used that helped us, at least with the discovery part of it, to recognize, wow, there are a lot of SaaSOps applications out there, and the people who are actually just giving out, credentials to different companies that we weren't aware about. So we had to scramble to try and control that. So there were a lot of those fun times, but ultimately we discovered that we can't actually work from home, but you have to build it block by block and put a lot of different tools together to achieve a holistic view of what security and governance and compliance looks like.
Wonderful. I'm glad you brought up zero trust. We'll certainly get every panelist's thoughts on that here in just a moment. Before we do, Jason, I'm really curious, some of the key initiatives you undertook as your company was experienced this rapid growth and success over the past year. What are some of the key initiatives that you implemented to make sure that the organization stayed secure during this growth phase?
Yeah, so one thing I want to mention at the start, which I think is very important, is not exactly a new initiative, but is something that underpins pretty much every software change that we make at Starling Bank, is the idea that we can deploy rapidly, i.e. multiple times a day, and safely at the same time. And I think that this is a key thing that many people don't have, many organizations don't have availability for. They don't have the ability to deploy simultaneously, safely, and rapidly. And they try and layer all sorts of advanced technologies and advanced ways of doing things on top of what they're doing, but they don't have the ability to change quickly when those things turn out to not quite work or need, tweaking, need development, need iterative changes. So I think that that's really, a key fundamental cornerstone, which has seen us through the the rapid growth in the pandemic and so on and so on. A lot of the changes we're making have to do with training. We're much more on top of training now and making sure that all the bank staff know what a phishing attack is. They know what social engineering is, and so on and so on, and all these sort of things, because you have to make sure that you can't get into the bank via staff compromise. We've also tried to do that ourselves. We keep running endless penetration testing of ourselves, both internally. We have teams that try and do that, try and make sure, try and break into our systems, and externally we get people in who have a fresh perspective, different ideas to try and attack our own systems in a variety of different ways, because you're never going to, no system is 100% secure, and the only way that you can ensure continual growth in your security is by continually attacking your own systems, finding the holes and plugging them before the criminals do. So that is something that we've definitely ramped up. We've also started bringing more advanced techniques in, such as machine learning, and this is especially in the fraud area and that sort of thing. Questions like, how do I spot an unusual transaction, or how do I spot someone who, say, is trying to do money laundering? That's the sort of question which it is difficult for a regular automated system to answer, because it goes, well, what is unusual? So you have to try and train the system to learn what is unusual, and that's where machine learning comes in. So that's definitely something that has expanded over the recent past, and Starling has definitely become more and more of a thing, more and more of a machine learning assisted, not fully machine learning. We haven't turned any systems completely over to the machines yet, but we have definitely assisted our fraud team and financial crime team with a machine learning capability in order to help them focus in on the cases which really could be fraudulent and which they really need to look at.
Yet being your operative word in terms of handing over the systems to the machines. But I think was really great about your story is that you have to get the fundamentals done right, and they have to be solid before you can start doing some of those advanced things like machine learning. You talked about penetration testing and change management and social awareness or social engineering awareness for your whole organization. I think that's so key to make sure you do the fundamentals before you attract go after the new shiny project. So that's wonderful. Colin, let's hear about some of the key initiatives you have going on, especially with this contraction and then back to expansion through your organization. What have you been up to this year?
I think so Essence was in a really good position because we've always been cloud-based, always been SaaS first, been on Google Workspace since 2009. So a lot of the sort of the challenges that some companies had with the adoption of video conferencing systems, whether it was Teams, Zoom, or Google Meet, it was already a natural part of the applications that we used, and the same with collaboration and not sending documents backwards and forwards and connecting to VPNs, and we never had any of the problems of that I've heard other companies have, where they ran out of VPN licenses and had to, quickly buy more endpoint licenses, increase the throughput of their, data centers for the VPN endpoints to connect. I never had any of that, so I'm very, very thankful. What we were able to do was to finish off some of the projects that we did have. Obviously, we did have some legacy file servers. We had some holdouts that were like, oh, we're in the office, we could just connect through the network. We like our file server, please leave it alone. When everybody was at home, it's like, when you told us to get off of the file server and adopt shared drives, we should have listened. We are now listening now. Can you please help us to fully adopt shared drives and, get rid of the VPN requirement? That was our sort of the things that we focused on in the last year. And then obviously there's the security aspect, that you can use tools to protect the data and verify the identity.
Wonderful. Yeah, it sounds like you were prepared, which I think is really key to make sure that you had a playbook to follow, or that it was always the playbook and you just kind of continue business as normal. I think that's
Yeah, a lot of the users were used to collaborating, either with remote clients or being in an office and collaborating in all of these tools. So them being at home and collaborating in all of these tools, there was essentially no change, just the quality and the availability of coffee in the kitchen as opposed to the staff break room.
Right. Oh, wonderful. Well, let's wrap things up with the final question for our panelists here. And this one's juicy. We probably could have filled the whole time slot with just this one. But how do you see the future of zero trust IT playing out? And what does zero trust IT even mean to you, maybe to begin with? Aaron, why don't we start with you? What does zero trust IT mean to you, and where do you see it going in the future?
Absolutely. So, zero trust IT means more than identity verification and granting access to different systems. To me, it means it's sort of understanding the landscape as not just identification, but it includes either the network, it includes security, it includes the applications, it includes a lot of different pieces, all centered around the user. So I look at that as the first block, and then around the networks. Now, the networks are now wherever your users are. So it kind of, for me, harkens back to when I think about SaaSOps. So there's the user, and then there's the networks that all kinds of come together. Now, how do we, from the security and the technology side, continue to have a sort of a level of or standard of protecting the company assets? So that becomes the challenge. And we try to do this a couple of different ways. Putting through administrative controls. That was one of the things we had to do because we didn't have enough of that to begin with. And then we started off kind of, like what Colin was saying earlier really resonated with me, where we had the office, we had the VPN access, we had VPN to the cloud, and we had VPN to the office. A lot of the project folks were in the office, so all they needed to be was in the office to access client environments. That was all set up. Working from home, that just totally went away. Now, how do you manage that? So we tried initially to have them go VPN to the cloud and then get that whole IP whitelisting to the client environment. Did not work. It was a bottleneck. So we had to backtrack and try. Well, we can't really do this. Like, now, who really needs access to VPN to access those assets? Turns out not a whole lot of people needed outside of engineering. So we were able to scale down on folks using VPN and to access those kind of assets. And then we started a whole initiative. Now that we have folks working from everywhere in the world, let's start the zero trust identity management. And that's been a challenge, just trying to actually do that right. Like trying to identify the systems that are critical and making sure that we have, we got some third-party vendors to help us with that initiative. And of course, they're working outside. They don't fully understand sort of the layout of the company. So you have those standard things. And the third thing which we recognized was what I call the soft skills, how you deal with your users. So it had to become, now your users are working remotely. Prior to that, they were in the office, they could either stop by, IT help desk, or they were there, you could talk to them and things got resolved. But now they're home. It became a thing of where we had to actually work sort of hand in hand, where we would always remind users like, hey, we'll help you out in this situation, but there's going to come a time when we are getting more licenses for like endpoint protection, or there's a malware detection where we need you to kind of stop working and help us out. Because in the past, they would just hand you the laptop, you'd give them a loaner laptop, everyone went about their business. You couldn't do that anymore. It took you 2-3 days to get a replacement laptop. Meanwhile, there's a malware that's preventing them from doing work. So those kind of things, and I had to teach the team, like, listen, you have to understand there's a currency with having those soft skills to manage people. And a lot of times it was kind of an educational process where you're saying, we're in this together. We want to help you, but you have to understand you have to meet us halfway. So there's some of the soft skills that we all have to learn on the fly, working with a very remote and diverse workforce.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Jason, what do you think? What is zero trust IT, and what does the future hold for it?
So I think zero trust IT goes, it definitely includes users and their devices and so on and where they are, but it goes beyond that. It goes into the actual individual systems behind what's happening, the individual systems that make up your software architecture. The vast majority of software these days is not made up of a single monolith, but is made up of multiple different systems interacting with each other, both internally and then interacting to different systems on the outside. And for me, the idea of zero trust IT is that each of these systems doesn't have zero trust, but it verifies everything that comes into it. It trusts it to a certain extent, but verifies it. It makes sure that that the requesting system has permission to do what it asks to do, and that sort of thing. It has it checks and verifies that enough people agree with the action that is being proposed, so that you get multiple people having to confirm rather than just one, and so on and so on. It checks that such an action is can be executed, that it hasn't already been executed, and so on and so on. And this sort of independent and skeptical systems is really, for me, the core of zero trust IT, making sure that you really have the ability for systems to act on their own to a certain extent, and so that you don't get this situation where an attacker can compromise one system and then have compromised all the systems. If you have that roadblock that they manage to compromise one system, but then the second system down goes, well, no, I'm not playing ball. I'm not going along with this. I don't trust it. That's when you really have that sort of zero trust IT, which allows you, ironically, to put a lot of trust in your IT, because you realize that the IT is being mistrustful and skeptical on your behalf.
Is it zero trust or full trust? I guess depends whose perspective, right?
Well, trust and skepticism have to be in balance, and they both have to be somewhere in a system for a system to work, right? And the question is where. And I think in the past we've had very much this idea that the IT systems are too naive, they're too trusting. They have 100% trust. They just go, sure, I've been given a command, I'll execute it. And that leads to a lot of problems in both terms of reliability and security. So we need to put more of the skepticism into the IT systems so that we can have less of the skepticism in ourselves and in our processes and procedures.
I love that. Love that. Colin, what's your perspective? What do you think about zero trust IT, and what does the future hold?
So for me, zero trust IT is focusing on the identity as a priority, and really moving away from the outdated previous corporate belief that you needed to spend all of your security time, focus, and security funding on that corporate laptop, the Lenovo, the Dell, the HP, the MacBook that has been issued to somebody. I think the days of spending all of the time, creating a gold image and securing and patching only the corporate device really needs to end. And then you're using, software like context-aware access from a number of different vendors. We use, because we're on Google Workspace, we use on Enterprise SKU, we use Google's context-aware access to verify that any device that the end user is logging into to access our corporate data meets some of our basic security requirements of minimum, OS patch level, hard disk encryption, etc. The basics that you get on a corporate device, but extending it to any device. So I think it is moving away from that belief that the walled garden, as Aaron was saying, the internet is everybody's network connection because they're connecting from anywhere. So you need to focus on the identity and what the identity is doing. And as Jason said, it's all about trust but verify, and verify all the time.
Fantastic. And Claire, why don't you round us out? What does zero trust IT mean to you, and what's your perspective on what the future holds for it?
I don't think we should be too hung up on the terminology of what zero trust is, because it's the latest in a long line of, I will say buzzwords, but that's maybe doing it a disservice. I think ultimately what we need to come down to is the fact that technology needs to enable the business to function. Ultimately, we're an enabler, right? And if we enact zero trust, it stops the business from functioning. And I've seen it in practice more recently, where we have just nothing, at which point the business grinds to a halt. So we have to be balanced in our approach as to how we can put this into practice. And you protect the things that are most precious to you, the same as you would do in your personal life. You protect the things that are most important. So your data, your customer data, the things that you value the most, and you work out how you can protect and secure that. And then you work out how you can be more free with the rest of that information. So you have trusted partners, you protect your critical infrastructure, and you work out and you identify privileged users and provide them access accordingly. If we trust nothing, I think we'll be in a position where the business will grind to a halt. So it's about adapting our principles and adapting the way the business operates to be able to allow information to flow, but do it in a secure way. So there's technology out there that enables us to do that, and we have to be smart and we have to preempt how we and the business needs us to work so that we can make things happen. So that's zero trust to me.
Wonderful. Well, first off, I would like to thank each of you for your perspectives and your time and just tremendous stories. And I would like to also thank each of you listening, everyone in the audience here. Again, thank you to each of our panelists. Thank all of you, and enjoy the rest of your altitude.